It's Mr. G, and today we're going to be looking at specialization and trade. So we've talked about production's possibilities frontiers so far and how it's a trade-off for different countries on how much they can produce. But now we want to factor in, well, we live in a global economy. People can trade between countries. So we're going to break it down into, a simple example, but let's first go over some terms. So first of all, there's absolute advantage. When one person or a nation, country, is more productive than the other, needs fewer inputs, or takes less time to produce a good or perform a production task. So they're better at everything with it in producing. Now we have comparative advantage, the ability of a person to perform an activity or produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost than anyone else. And so we're going to look into these terms and look at an example to explain what's happening. So if you look in this particular time, we have two people. We have Brooklyn and we have Brennan, okay? Now, Brooklyn has an absolute advantage. Look at what she can produce in an hour's time. Remember, we have this in a specified period of time, how much they can produce in an hour. And so for Brooklyn, she can produce 20 bagels and no pizzas, or she can produce 22 pizzas and no bagels. So that's what she can do in an hour. What can Brennan do? Well, he can produce 10 bagels and no pizzas in an hour, or he can produce 9 pizzas and no bagels in an hour. And you look at it, well, it's like Brooklyn has the advantage. She shouldn't bother trading with Brennan, who obviously isn't as good or as efficient or essentially with it. I mean, he is productively efficient, but he's not as good as basically he's not able to produce as much. But now let's break it down with the numbers. So in an hour, Brooklyn can produce either 20 bagels or 22 pizzas, and those are the choice. Well, let's have a look here, and let's put things in terms of opportunity cost. So remember, with opportunity cost, we're going to be looking at first at how much every bagel costs. So the top part, the numerator portion, is what we have to give up. What do we have to give up in order to produce 20 bagels? Well, we have to give up 22 pizzas because she can produce 22 pizzas in an hour, 20 bagels. So what she receives is at the bottom. That's the 20 bagels. And what she gives up is at the top, that's the 22. So 22 divided by 20, we simplify it, and we get essentially 1.1 pizzas for every bagel. So every bagel costs 1.1 pizzas. Now let's turn it around and see how much every pizza costs for her. And so we have to give up 20 bagels to produce 22 pizzas. And so that means every pizza costs 0.9 bagels. Okay, so let's have a look at now with Brennan and do the same thing. So in an hour, you can produce either 10 bagels or 9 pizzas. So if we put it in terms of opportunity costs, first of all, every bagel, we have to give up what it costs. And so that means in the top example here, we have to give up 9 pizzas to produce 10 bagels. Okay, so 0.9 pizzas. And on the bottom part, we have to give up 10 pizzas to produce 9 bagels. So every pizza costs 1.111 bagels. Okay, so if you're looking at it, you can see which one is the lowest opportunity cost. Well, for Brooklyn, it is 0.9 bagels. And for Brennan, it's 0.9 pizzas. So if they decide to produce just what they have the lowest opportunity cost for, that's the comparative advantage. So even though Brooklyn obviously has the absolute advantage, she's better at making both, she would still essentially benefit from producing what she would have a comparative advantage, and Brennan what he has a comparative advantage. Okay, so essentially that's what you should be producing. So together, they could produce 22 pizza and 10 bagels on their own, increase the overall production. If they just did it on their own, so each country decided to just produce on their own, they could only do, say, 21 pizzas and 10 bagels. You can see by them choosing to go where they have the comparative advantage, it's actually increased the production's possibility frontier, essentially what can be produced in the world. Okay, because everyone essentially not producing individually, they're able to essentially produce more. So in that way, we could have an increase. So that's the reason for trade. So even trading with different countries where they're not as efficient, while they're still on their production possibility frontier, but they can't produce as much. So even in those situations, it's beneficial to trade. And what do you trade in? It's the one that you essentially have the lower opportunity cost. And so in this case, essentially, Brooklyn should be just producing pizzas, and Brennan should just be producing bagels, okay? Because essentially it is the lowest opportunity cost. All right, so I'm Mr. G. Bye for now.